What's up, people? I'm gonna give about 1 minute and we're gonna go ahead and get started. All right. I do want to go ahead and get started. Working with limited time here. But first, let me just say what's going on to all the Patreon supporters, as usual. You all are the gasoline or the solar power, if we're going to talk about progressive fuel. But you are the solar power that keeps this engine running at MCSC. So as always, I want to give a shout out. Also, we have a new feature on YouTube. Just wanted to let you all know we can post stories now to our YouTube channel, and so you will be able to go and if you love seeing my cats, they will be there. If you love, I'll be vlogging a lot there, and hopefully some of our other contributors will contribute to the YouTube stories as well. I'll give you a little bit of insight into the day-to-day grind of the independent journalist, if you will, the up-and-coming independent journalist. And yeah, so thank you all so much for tuning in to this segment of Mi Casa Su Casa. And of course, as always, I am your host, Niko House. Yesterday, there was a big upset, if you will. Barbara Lee lost, and I was disappointed in that. I was very disappointed because, well, Barbara Lee has had a history of progressivism. Not only has she had a history of progressivism on domestic policy, but she's actually also had a history of progressivism when it comes to foreign policy as well. Barbara Lee, obviously, considering the identity politics game that has been played by the Democratic Party specifically over the last couple of years, is a strong, very outspoken black woman who has been on the right side of every issue that I can think of for a very, very long time. It's hard to get someone who's been in the game for that long, and when they step up, to see their track record very similar to what we saw with Bernie Sanders, right? We couldn't really believe just his history of progressivism, his history of being on the right side of the issues, his history of voting pretty much in the right direction almost every single time. And that's what we had with Barbara Lee. A lot of people wanted her to be Speaker of the House, but I was actually okay with being the chairperson of the Democratic Caucus, because essentially whatever Nancy Pelosi would be quote unquote pushing for would come from the caucus, and the caucus's general temperature, if you will, would oftentimes be mostly persuaded by the leader of that caucus, the chairperson of that caucus. But she didn't win, unfortunately, and she was beat by a young man, well, 48 years old-ish, named Hakeem Jefferies. Now, there have been many people making the claim that Hakeem Jefferies is a progressive. No, I want to be objective and I want to be honest. Hakeem Jefferies isn't necessarily on the wrong side of every issue. I would consider him a left-leaning centrist. In other words, he didn't actually vote for the most recent military budget, so he voted nay on that in the House. He is supposedly for Medicare for all, but then he has some troubling comments. He quotes Reagan regularly. And not only was he for Hillary Clinton, but he was one of the tools, one of the mouthpieces to try and drag Bernie's name through the dirt, using his identity as a black man to say that Bernie speaking on race issues at that point in time. It was 2016, roughly, end of 2015. He went on CNN and said that Bernie is he's oversimplifying race relations, and he thinks that Hillary would be better equipped to deal with race relations. In the moment that, as a black man, especially a black man from New York, especially a black man who has been here during the entire Clinton Kool-Aid fiasco that has been the last 30 years of their political dominion, I don't think you get to say that and you are considered a legitimate progressive, right? Jeffries apparently won by making the argument that he is younger than Barbara Lee and we need some new young leadership. Well, that's not exactly what I was thinking of, because the truth of the matter is, and this is just as a black person being around black spaces, people in that 45 to 55 range are the ones who drank the Clinton Kool-Aid the most. They're the ones who buy into the Democratic plantation sense the most. They believe that they have to if they play ball, then they'll be able to advance and get that House Speaker position or that House leadership position, that committee position, that committee leadership position, maybe potentially being a DNC chair one day. Like that is the age group that I don't want in leadership positions, actually, because they're more likely to capitulate to their seniors who are just a few years removed from them, right? So like if I asked Hakeem Jefferies what he thought about John R. Lewis's comments about Bernie Sanders when he straight up lied and said that Bernie Sanders was nowhere to be found in the civil rights movement, but said that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were all over, their fingerprints were all over the positive aspects of the civil rights movement, which we know isn't true because Hillary Clinton was a Goldwater girl, right? We know for a fact that that was not true. In fact, Hillary Clinton was racist. I mean, she is racist, but I'm saying you can't be for Barry Goldwater, whose whole thing was, let's bring back segregation. That was the main part of his platform. And say, I was in the civil rights movement. But if I asked Hakeem Jefferies what he thought about John R. Lewis saying that, what would you think he would say? Well, people can change. People can evolve. People, you know, they learn, they live, they get experience, and they become different people, except for her policies. Her policies are no different. Her husband's policies that she advocates for to this very day are no different. So that generation, that 45 to 55, maybe even 60, they were the ones who consumed the Clinton Kool-Aid the most and still wholeheartedly believe in it. That is the generation, if you will, that pretty much made Hillary Clinton competitive. I'm speaking about black people right now. I can't speak for everybody. I'm saying just that generation in general. That 45 to 55 for black communities in black spaces, they drank that Clinton Kool-Aid more than anybody else. Remember, saxophone, Arsenio Hall show. They still believe that Clinton was the first black president. That's what I was raised believing. And it was like half-heartedly a joke, but they still felt that Bill Clinton represented black people in a way that he didn't. And Hakeem Jefferies is a product of that political environment. On top of that, even though he has voted for some what I would call liberal, because there are some liberal policies that are good, right? There are progressive policies and there are liberal policies that in just about every liberal policy can be progressive, but not every progressive policy is a liberal one. As in, sometimes liberal policies don't take things far enough, if you will. So even though he has a habit of mostly voting for liberal policies, mostly voting yay, he doesn't ever vote against race, anything that has to do with race, so that's good. But once you're a speaker piece for CNN and Hillary Clinton, I can't trust you. And I wonder where that could come from. Well, most of his money, about $250,000 in his last political cycle, he actually raised most of it from lobbyists. Lobbyists, people. So at that point, needless to say, it's follow the money, no matter what. I would actually be more impressed if someone took that money and just voted in every voted for every progressive piece of legislation. But when you're taking that money, he says he's for Medicare for all, but he's been in Congress for almost 2 decades, if I recall. So if you're for Medicare for all, no, excuse me, not 2 decades, a decade. I apologize. But if you're for Medicare for all, why haven't you introduced it yourself? Why haven't you been aggressive on that? If, you know what I'm saying, if you're against the military budget increases, like, you should be speaking out, because if you're going to be a leader of the Democratic caucus and you're going to call yourself a progressive leader within that Democratic caucus, that at that point, it is your job to be bold and outspoken. And I would say, if we're going to go with Jeffries, we might as well have went with Ro Khanna. Right? I don't like Ro Khanna. You know how I feel about Ro Khanna. I feel like Ro Khanna's an opportunist, but at least Ro Khanna will speak up every now and then. Even if he doesn't vote in every single way I like, he pretends to be progressive. He starts conversations that aren't traditional in neoliberal circles. I would have been more okay with that than Jeffries. But when you're taking, he got $100 million, good God. He got over $1 million in donations. Most of those were for corporations and lobbyists. So how can I expect you to be the bold leader that I know Barbara Lee is, that I know Barbara Lee has been, when you had your chance to join that revolution that every one of us have we have mixed feelings about, but we can't pretend that there wasn't a revolution, that Bernie Sanders did not start a revolution. We can't pretend that he did not start that. Why is it that when you had your chance to join that revolution, you ignored it? Matter of fact, you did more than ignore it. You joined Hillary Clinton's team. Barbara Lee abstained from endorsing anybody, but she talked, oh my goodness, glowing reviews of Bernie Sanders' history. But Hakeem Jefferies went on CNN and caped for the establishment, caped for Hillary Clinton, said that Bernie, mind you, people, I don't know how many times, I haven't discussed this type of topic in a while, but at one point during the Democratic primaries, you know that discussing race relations was political suicide. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama never talked about race relations. No matter how many undercutting racial remarks that Hillary Clinton made, no matter how many racial acts, they would never bring up race. Why? Because it's too divisive in a lot of ways. Remember, liberals aren't, just because you're liberal, just because you're progressive, doesn't mean you're not racist. It doesn't mean that you're not going to look out for your own self-interest that is associated with your identity. It doesn't mean that. It would be nice if it meant that, but it doesn't. I know plenty of racist progressives, way more than I'd like to admit, unfortunately. So it's always been that way, though. It was political suicide to speak of race relations in the primaries. Bernie Sanders started that, and I know. I was at Fort Sumter, South Carolina, when there was a total of maybe 50, 60 people in the crowd. And he was still speaking of race relations. He was still speaking glowingly of the Black Lives Matter movement. He was still condemning police brutality. He was still talking about our Native American brothers and sisters who have still been wrong and are continuously being wrong till this very day. He still was talking about the prison industrial complex. I don't know what Hakeem Nicks has done. If he's done something regarding any of these issues, he was never bold about it, and that is what I look for in a leader. If I can't look to, like, okay, maybe you're mostly progressive or mostly liberal, but then your money says something else, then I look at, well, what are they being bold about? What are they speaking about? What are they drawing attention to? Because that is what I believe a progressive is. A liberal sits in the corner and waits for things to come down, and they make decisions based off of which way they believe the tide is turning. Whereas a progressive is bold enough to speak out openly and boldly about the issues that have affected us and will affect us in the future if they don't get squared away right now. So I would love to know what you think about this particular topic. Make sure you leave a like and comment below. Like I said, go check that the YouTube story that we have now, where I will be vlogging and posting pictures of my babies and asking political questions and things like that. Other than that, make sure you join us on Roku, of course, JustNForm.com. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.